Chapter 4295. Please enter the text. Di Sudong sighed when he saw this. He could not understand how they had ended up being held hostage by the other party, when they clearly had the upper hand. Then what do you want to do? Di Sudong stared coldly at Bailey Hongzhuang. He had originally thought that Wang Yanhan was the leader of the team, and had placed all his attention on him. It was only now that he realized that this woman was not easy to deal with. She had actually turned the situation around. How hateful. It's very simple. As long as you promise not to cause trouble for us in the future, and give me 50,000 spirit stones, that will do. Bailey Hongzhuang's expression was calm. The golden sunlight shone on her face, making her delicate and pretty face appear charming and charming. However, when the crowd heard Bailey Hongzhuang's exorbitant demand, they could not help but be dumbfounded. 50,000 spirit stones. This Bailey Hongzhuang's list is really not small. 50,000 spirit stones. That's not a small number. I'm afraid that the Di family will be angered to death by Bailey Hongzhuang. She asked for so many spirit stones. If they agree, where will the Di family put their face? When Di Sudong heard Bailey Hongzhuang's words, his expression became increasingly gloomy. Little girl, don't go overboard. Overboard? Bailey Hongzhuang laughed softly. No matter how overboard I am, can I be more overboard than you? The grudge between Di Wentao and my senior brother is between the two of them. Your Di family is rather interesting. The younger one has lost, and the older one has run out. According to your logic, if my senior brother and Di Wentao were to fight one-on-one, would it be one-on-one against him, or your entire family? If you want to talk about going overboard, I don't think anyone is more overboard than you, right? Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes flickered with disgust and disdain. The other party's method was very unreasonable. As expected, when Bailey Hongzhuang finished speaking, the surrounding cultivators could not help but nod their heads. Speaking of which, the problem between Di Wentao and Wang Yanhan should be resolved by themselves. Moreover, everyone was clear that it had always been Di Wentao who took the initiative to find trouble with Wang Yanhan. Wang Yanhan had been avoiding him all along. It was only in the end that he had no choice but to make a move. He had never expected that a group of cultivators from the Di family would rush over right after he had gotten rid of Di Wentao. This was equivalent to provoking the other party's entire family. According to the Di family's way of doing things, no one dared to provoke the Di family. However, in this way, they could only be bullied by the Di family. To be honest, everyone was somewhat dissatisfied. After Di Sudong and the others heard this, they also felt embarrassed. If the young one couldn't do it, the old one would step in. Overall, they were indeed unreasonable. So what? You killed my brother, so it's only right that we avenge him. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame yourselves for having no background. Even if you die, no one will avenge you. This is a very normal thing in the upper realm. So, it's normal for me to blackmail you now. Think about it yourselves. Bailey Hongzhuang's expression was cold. She really could not be bothered to talk nonsense with this idiot DeVows. If you agree, I can give you the antidote. Otherwise we'll fight to the death. Anyway, we have nothing to lose. At most, we only have one life. It's not bad to have you as a scapegoat. Chapter 4296. Di Sudong looked at Bailey Hongzhuang angrily. He really wanted to arrest Bailey Hongzhuang and the others directly. This guy thought that he had caught their weakness and was proud of himself. This feeling of being pinched by the other party really made him feel very unhappy. Do it. Capture all of them. I don't believe that we can't find the antidote. Di Sudong said angrily. He had been angered by Bailey Hongzhuang time and time again, so he was no longer clear-headed. The essence energy in Di Beichen's body surged instantly. His black eyes were as deep as the sea, and filled with surging killing intent. At that moment, Wu Wenfeng walked out of the blazing flame sect. He sighed helplessly when he saw the confrontation in front of him. He had already expected that the Di family would not let the matter rest, but he had not expected them to confront each other so quickly. What's going on? Wu Wenfeng walked over to Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. His eyes darted back and forth between Bailey Hongzhuang and the Di family, obviously trying to figure out what had happened. Steward Wu, The Di family is here to cause trouble. Wang Yanhan could not help but say. Wu Wenfeng frowned slightly and looked at Di Sudong. Brother Di, I think that I have already made myself very clear. Are you determined to become enemies with the Blazing Flame sect? He had already been very unhappy with Devao's attitude previously. He felt that the Di family thought highly of themselves and did not even care about the Blazing Flame sect. Now that they were actually causing trouble outside the Blazing Flame sect, one could imagine how unhappy he was. Di Sudong was also unhappy when he heard Wu Wenfeng's words. He felt that Wu Wenfeng was really using a chicken feather as a token of authority, and thought that he was a big shot in the Blazing Flame sect. However, no matter how unhappy he was, he could only suppress all of this at the moment. Steward Wu, it's not what you think it is. However, it's good that you're here. Bailey Hongzhuang of the Raging Flames sect poisoned Wu Zhe, and even tried to blackmail us. I think you should deal with this matter properly. Di Sudong's face did not look good. Originally, he did not know how to deal with this matter. Now that Wu Wenfeng had come, it was an opportunity to solve the problem. Hearing Di Sudong's words, Wu Wenfeng was slightly stunned, and his eyes revealed some surprise. Poison? Is this true? Wu Wenfeng turned to look at Bailey Hongzhuang and asked. Yes. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. The Di family intended to gang up on us. I had no choice but to do so. Wang Yanhan also said. The situation just now was very dangerous. If it wasn't for Junior Sister's actions, I'm afraid we would all be dead now. Di Sudong and the others' expressions changed slightly, but they did not refute. After all, everyone had witnessed the development of the situation. There was no point in denying it. Wu Wenfeng was also a smart person. He sized up the situation before him and understood what had happened. Brother Di, they are all disciples of the Blazing Flame sect. The Blazing Flame sect is responsible for their safety. I hope that on account of our past relationship, you will not cause trouble here. Otherwise, if this continues, both sides will not be happy. Chapter 4297. Logically speaking, this was still within the Fiery Inferno sect's jurisdiction. If the other party could not wait to make a move, wouldn't it be a slap to the Fiery Inferno sect's face? Steward Wu, this matter is not as you described, Di Sudong immediately explained. Bailey Hongzhuang had a bad premonition when she noticed Di Sudong's gaze on Di Beichen. When Di Sudong opened his mouth, she sighed inwardly. He was indeed a sly old fox. Steward Wu, I know that Wang Yanhan and the other two are from the Fiery Inferno sect. Even if I am unhappy with them, I would not choose to attack them at the Fiery Inferno sect's gates. However, the Di family's target is this man in white. It's just that when we attacked this man, the three of them participated in the battle themselves. In all fairness, this matter should not be our problem, right? Or, is this man in white also a disciple of the Fiery Inferno sect? Di Sudong's face rippled with a faint smile, but his eyes were filled with a hidden sharpness. No matter what, as long as Di Beichen was not a disciple of the Fiery Inferno sect, they were in the right. As expected, Wu Wenfeng's expression became complicated when he heard Di Sudong's words. In fact, he had already noticed Di Beichen when he had just come out. It was hard to ignore such an outstanding man. However, he did not overlook the closeness between Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen. In his heart, he had already guessed that the other party's relationship with Bailey Hongzhuang was definitely not simple. In the face of Di Sudong's questioning, Wu Wenfeng's mind raced. He had not expected the situation to suddenly turn out this way. If he said that Di Beichen was not a disciple of the Fiery Inferno sect, Bailey Hongzhuang, and the rest would not sit idly by as long as Di Beichen, and the rest still decided to attack Di Beichen. If he said that Di Beichen was a disciple of the Fiery Inferno sect, no matter how one looked at it, it would seem a little far-fetched. The Di family would also find it difficult to accept his explanation. Then it would be tantamount to completely falling out between the two sides. It had not been easy for him to recruit Bailey Hongzhuang. An inscription master was very valuable to the Fiery Inferno sect, so he had to protect her. Therefore, how should he answer this question? The eyes of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others also fell on Wu Wenfeng's face, They just wanted to know what decision Wu Wenfeng would make. Di Sudong and the others were also in the same state. Under such circumstances, they did not believe that Wu Wenfeng could still say such words. While Wu Wenfeng's to the Inferno sex, the family sex, it's so livelies. There was a faint smile on Cheng Zhonghao's face as he walked calmly and easily towards Wu Wenfeng and the others. His eyes were looking at Bailey Hongzhuang with interest. Although he had been rejected by Bailey Hongzhuang earlier, he had arranged for people to keep an eye on the place. As long as there was any movement, they would immediately report to him. He had never thought that such a lively scene would occur. How interesting. He studied Bailey Hongzhuang curiously. Ever since he knew that Bailey Hongzhuang was an inscription master, he had always wanted to meet this extremely young inscription master. But he had never had the chance. Wu Wenfeng clearly treated Bailey Hongzhuang as a treasure. He had covered her up and did not want anyone to see her at all. Chapter 4298. After Wu Wenfeng saw Cheng Zhonghao, his face stiffened slightly. Cheng Zhonghao was definitely one of the people he didn't want to see. Sure enough, since Cheng Zhonghao arrived, he found that Cheng Zhonghao's eyes had been fixed on Bailey Hongzhuang. Obviously, he had found out Bailey Hongzhuang's identity. Compared to Wu Wenfeng's worry, Di Sudong and the others smiled happily after seeing Cheng Zhonghao. In their opinion, Cheng Zhonghao was on the same side as them. Master Cheng, you're here? Cheng Zhonghao smiled and nodded. Yes, I happened to pass by and noticed that something seemed to have happened here. So I came to take a look. I didn't expect it to be you guys. Listening to Cheng Zhonghao's words, Wu Wenfeng cursed in his heart. This guy definitely rushed over after hearing the news. What did he mean by passing by? It was impossible. Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but look at Cheng Zhonghao. She had heard of the only inscription master in Rong and city many times. Previously, someone had informed her that Cheng Zhonghao wanted to see her, but she refused. She didn't expect to see Cheng Zhonghao in the end. I wonder if this is the owner of that inscription? Cheng Zhonghao looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with a smile, but his question was directed at Wu Wenfeng. Obviously, only he and Wu Wenfeng knew about that matter. Hearing this, Wu Wenfeng's thoughts were really complicated. The previous troublesome matter hadn't been solved, and now there was another big trouble. It really made him restless. At the same time, Bailey Hongzhuang understood a bit in her heart. The inscription that Cheng Zhonghao mentioned was probably the one that Steward Wu had taken out to appraise. However, after noticing the complicated expression on Wu Wenfeng's face, she understood what was going on. That's right. Wu Wenfeng nodded. At this point, it was useless for him to hide it. From Cheng Zhonghao's performance, it could be seen that he had already confirmed this fact. Even if he didn't admit it, Cheng Zhonghao would find ways to confirm it himself. The smile on Cheng Zhonghao's lips gradually widened, and his gaze towards Bailey Hongzhuang became brighter and brighter. He had guessed correctly. The inscription was actually created by such a young girl. This news was too hard to believe. It seemed that this young woman had an incredible master behind her. To be able to have such attainments in inscriptions at such a young age, one could see how amazing he was. He had to befriend her. If he could obtain the inscription pattern technique from her, that would be great. I didn't expect that young lady would have such attainments in the inscription technique at such a young age. I'm impressed. I wonder if I have the honor of befriending you? Cheng Zhonghao's every move was refined and courteous, and his gaze was sincere and serious. It was as if he treated Bailey Hongzhuang as someone of equal weight, and not just a junior. Wu Wenfeng and Bailey Hongzhuang understood why Cheng Zhonghao had such an attitude. However, the other cultivators and the Di family members present could not help but be dumbfounded when they saw this scene. Oh my god, am I seeing things? Master Cheng actually has such an attitude towards Bailey Hongzhuang? Chapter 4299. When Wanyan Han used that inscription pattern, I already noticed its power. Now it seems that the level of that inscription pattern is definitely not low. The cultivators of the Raging Flame sect suddenly understood everything at this moment. No wonder Steward Wu would still recruit Bailey Hongzhuang under such circumstances. It was because of her inscription technique. Previously, Everyone thought that since Bailey Hongzhuang was so young, even if she had mastered the inscription technique, her attainment in the inscription technique would not be strong. Now that Cheng Zonghao had appeared, everyone understood that her inscription technique was definitely not simple. This was because there were originally many young inscriptionists in Rong'an City. These people were all trying their best to squeeze into Cheng Zonghao's line of sight, wanting to learn from him. However, it was extremely difficult to be accepted as a disciple by Cheng Zonghao. As for the situation where Cheng Zonghao took the initiative to look for her, it was even more unheard of. Di Sudong and the rest could not help but be dumbfounded after seeing this scene. They originally thought that Cheng Zonghao was on their side, and that he was targeting Wu Wenfeng. However, from the current situation, it seemed that the one that Cheng Zonghao was interested in was Bailey Hongzhuang. According to this development, Cheng Zonghao obviously wanted to extend an olive branch to Bailey Hongzhuang. In this way, besides Wu Wenfeng, wouldn't there be another force protecting Bailey Hongzhuang? Second uncle, what's the situation? DeVos also realized that the situation was a little strange at this moment, and could not help but look at Di Sudong. Di Sudong's face was ugly, and he couldn't help but sigh in his heart that Cheng Zonghao was really an old fox. All the previous words were actually just to get information from their mouths, so as to determine whether Bailey Hongzhuang was the person he was looking for. As for the rest of the situation, it was completely their own imagination. From the beginning to the end, Cheng Zonghao had never explicitly said that he had a grudge with Wu Wenfeng, but the meaning he had shown before was obviously so. Master Cheng, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. If there's a chance, I'm naturally willing to befriend Grandmaster, but in the current situation I'm afraid. Bailey Hongzhuang wasn't stupid. Although she didn't have any feelings for Master Cheng, she knew that this was a great opportunity to help them. It seemed that their current predicament could be resolved. Wang Yanhan and Yi Haomiao couldn't help but look at each other. They couldn't understand why this rarely seen Master Cheng would suddenly get involved in this matter. However, it didn't seem to be a bad thing. Don't worry, Miss Bailey. With me around, this won't be a problem. Cheng Zonghao's expression was calm and certain. To him, there was nothing more important than improving his inscription technique. Although the Di family was not a small force, he had nothing to fear in Rong'an City. If he wanted to protect someone, the Di family wouldn't dare to say anything. Di Sudong frowned. Cheng Zonghao's attitude was already very obvious in his words. However, he didn't expect the situation to suddenly be out of their control. At this moment, they had become the people with the least right to speak. Wu Wenfeng's heart also tightened. He knew Cheng Zonghao's style of doing things very well. This guy obviously wanted to recruit Bailey Hongzhuang to his side. How could this be? Chapter 4300. If he allowed Bailey Hongzhuang to leave just like that, the higher-ups would definitely blame him. At this thought, Wu Wenfeng hurriedly said, Master Cheng, Bailey Hongzhuang is a disciple of the Fiery Flame sect. We can handle her matters. We don't need to trouble you. Oh, Cheng Zonghao raised his eyebrows. But this man in white doesn't seem to be a disciple of the Fiery Flame sect? Although you are the steward of the Fiery Flame sect, it doesn't seem appropriate for you to show your face, does it? He had been watching the show for a while and naturally knew that Bewitching was definitely not a member of the Fiery Flame sect. After hearing Cheng Zonghao's words, Wu Wenfeng made up his mind. Now he no longer cared whether the Di family would misunderstand. Keeping Bailey Hongzhuang was the most important thing. Previously, Cheng Zonghao was the only inscription master in Rong'an City. They had been suppressed everywhere. Now they had finally found Bailey Hongzhuang to turn the tables. If Bailey Hongzhuang was also recruited by Cheng Zonghao, in the future, they would really be completely controlled by Cheng Zonghao. Master Cheng, you don't know this. This man in white is actually a disciple of the Fiery Flame sect. Once this was said, everyone present was stunned. This explanation was a little too far-fetched. Actually, Bailey Hongzhuang has already recommended him to me. He just hasn't reported to me yet. As you all know, it's time for the disciples of the Fiery Flame sect to report to you. He is now reporting to the Fiery Flame sect. Wu Wenfeng's expression was calm, but his palms could not help but sweat. This was the best explanation he could think of so far. Fortunately, everything could be connected. Although the explanation was a little far-fetched, at least there was nothing wrong with it. Bailey Hongzhuang, am I right? Wu Wenfeng looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and asked. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and nodded. Yes, this is Di Beichen whom I introduced to you before. Wu Wenfeng heaved a sigh of relief when he heard Bailey Hongzhuang's cooperative reply. He turned to look at Di Sudong and said, Brother Di, there was a misunderstanding earlier. He is also a disciple of the Inferno sect. I hope you can understand. Di Sudong's eyes were full of haze. Even a fool would know that Wu Wenfeng had changed his words at the last minute. However, in the current situation, whether he exposed it or not, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others couldn't touch her. So he simply didn't bother to expose it. Steward Wu, I won't say anything else. However, Bailey Hongzhuang poisoned Wu Zhe. Since she's a disciple of the Raging Flame sect, shouldn't you step forward and resolve this matter? Di Sudong's attitude was firm. No matter what, the problem of the poison had to be resolved. Wu Wenfeng frowned. This matter was indeed a little troublesome. He could not help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang and say, Bailey Hongzhuang, hand over the antidote. DeVos, who was originally extremely unhappy, had his eyes brighten when he heard this. As long as the antidote could be cured, it would not be too late to think about other things at length. Master, isn't it too unwise to hand over the antidote just like that? Xiao He was a little dissatisfied. The Di family was really asking for a lesson. It had not been easy to teach them a lesson, but now they had to return the antidote. It was really annoying. Chapter 4301. Steward Wu, I can hand over the antidote. Bailey Hongzhuang slowly said. Once these words were spoken, DeVos's face lit up with a delighted smile, while Di Sudong also heaved a sigh of relief. Even though they did not achieve their goal today, they did not suffer any losses. However, they attacked us first. We did not start the fight. I had no other choice but to do so. At the same time, I'm not a soft persimmon, and I won't let them bully me. I can hand over the antidote, but they must compensate me with 100,000 spirit stones. Otherwise, I won't hand it over. Bailey Hongzhuang's ink-black phoenix eyes flashed with a dazzling light. Her tone was unyielding and her aura was resolute. The other party had taken the initiative to cause trouble for them. If they did not pay a certain price, she would not let them go. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the faces of DeVos and the others turned abnormally ugly. They never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang's attitude would be so unyielding. Now that Wu Wenfeng had stepped in, she still dared to insist. Steward Wu, you've seen Bailey Hongzhuang's attitude. 100,000 spirit stones is simply an exorbitant demand. Di Sudong's face was filled with dissatisfaction. Today, he had tried to steal a chicken only to end up losing the rice used to lure it. He was already very unhappy, and had lost face in front of so many people. If Wu Wenfeng and Cheng Zonghao had not appeared, he would have immediately taken Bailey Hongzhuang's life. Now that he had agreed to let go, Bailey Hongzhuang still dared to ask for a yard after taking an inch. How hateful! Wu Wenfeng stared helplessly at Bailey Hongzhuang. He never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would say such a thing. Steward Wu, my wife's words are not wrong. They were the ones who had taken the initiative to cause trouble. If it wasn't for the fact that we still had some ability to protect ourselves, we would have died in their hands by now. Now shouldn't they compensate us? Di Beichen's voice was low and powerful. His wife was not someone who could be easily bullied. Naturally, he had to pay the price. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen's determined expressions, Wu Wenfeng understood that if the other party did not take out the 100,000 spirit stones, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others would not take out the antidote. At this moment, Cheng Zonghao spoke out as well. Miss Bailey is right indeed. How could we inscription masters be bullied and casually let off? 100,000 spirit stones is already a light compensation. As Cheng Zonghao's voice fell, Di Sudong couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. He couldn't help but curse in his heart. 100,000 spirit stones. And this was still a small number? Don't they know how much 100,000 spirit stones are worth? If the disciples of the Raging Inferno sect wanted to obtain 100,000 spirit stones for cultivating resources, they would have to stay here for a long time. However, Bailey Hongzhuang had asked for 100,000 spirit stones right off the bat. This was not an amount that the D family could easily give out. However, when he saw Cheng Zhonghao's nonchalant look, he also understood that inscription masters had always been rich people. There were many people who brought spirit stones to their doorstep. Therefore, their point of view on spirit stones was completely different from cultivators. At this thought, he suddenly recalled that Bailey Hongzhuang was actually an inscription master as well. That was why she had said such a shocking amount right off the bat. When he saw that Cheng Zhonghao had also spoken up for Bailey Hongzhuang, Wu Wenfeng couldn't help but say, "Brother D, you were indeed the ones who took the initiative to cause trouble today. It's only right for you to compensate a little. What do you think?" Chapter 4302. DeVos couldn't help but shout angrily. He couldn't understand why the situation in Rome and city was so different from what he had imagined. Who did Bailey Hongzhuang think she was? Now, everyone was siding with Bailey Hongzhuang. He suddenly felt that their roles had changed. Bailey Hongzhuang seemed to be the one with a background, while he was the one from the lower world without any background. It doesn't matter if you don't agree. Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at DeVos lazily. Isn't the D family very capable? You can find someone to cure you. I don't have time to entertain you. Her voice falling, Bailey Hongzhuang was about to leave. Di Wu's face was gloomy. His face was so dark that it was almost dripping water. However, he really didn't know what to say in the current situation. He could only clench his fists tightly and restrain himself from rushing forward. Di Sudong also pulled Di Wu's back. Now the Raging Flames sect clearly didn't put the D family in their eyes. Not to mention that Cheng Zhonghao was waiting to help Bailey Hongzhuang at any time. Under such circumstances, they couldn't gain any advantage at all. In that case, they might as well restrain themselves for the time being. Besides, Bailey Hongzhuang's antidote didn't mean that they really couldn't cure it. She might just be scaring them on purpose. It would be a joke if they took out 100,000 spirit stones just like that. Let's go. Di Sudong glared at Wu Wenfeng and Cheng Zhonghao. He would remember what had happened today. Cheng Zhonghao was extremely calm in the face of Di Sudong's glare. After all, he didn't have much interaction with the D family. If there was, it was the D family who begged him. He had never begged them. He didn't care whether they hated him or not. Wu Wenfeng felt helpless. Between Bailey Hongzhuang and the D family, he could only choose Bailey Hongzhuang. Therefore, he had no choice but to make this decision. Master Cheng, we have some internal matters to take care of. We'll take our leave first. Wu Wenfeng cupped his hands at Cheng Zhonghao and immediately left with Bailey Hongzhuang, Di Beichen and the others. It was obvious that he did not want Bailey Hongzhuang and Cheng Zhonghao to have any contact. Looking at Wu Wenfeng's expression, Cheng Zhonghao understood what he was thinking. He smiled and didn't say anything. It was not until Wu Wenfeng and the others walked into the Raging Flames gate that Cheng Zhonghao's subordinate could not help but ask, "Master Cheng, are we going to let them leave just like that? Steward Wu clearly doesn't want you to see Bailey Hongzhuang." It's normal for him to have such a reaction. I'm sure that every faction that finds such an inscription master would want to protect him and not let others know. After all, it would be a loss that they would not be able to bear if they were poached away by others. Cheng Zhonghao's lips curled into a faint smile. Today's trip was really worth it. Then what should we do? There's nothing to do. Cheng Zhonghao looked indifferent. As long as they're still in Rongan City, we'll have the chance to meet sooner or later. Wu Wenfeng is already afraid. This proves that he thinks that I can offer better terms than him. That's why he's afraid. Cheng Zhonghao's dark eyes flickered with confidence. He would definitely recruit Bailey Hongzhuang and obtain the perfect inscription method from her. Chapter 4303. At the thought of this, Cheng Zhonghao could not help but order, "Control the news. I don't want other inscription masters to hear about Bailey Hongzhuang." "Don't worry, master. I won't let this news spread." Upon hearing this, Cheng Zhonghao nodded in satisfaction and turned to walk back. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others followed Wu Wenfeng and walked slowly into the Raging Inferno sect. The surrounding disciples of the Raging Inferno sect started discussing after seeing this scene. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had put on a good show today. Wan Yanhan, your junior sister is really amazing. She could actually defeat the D family in that situation just now. 100,000 spirit stones. I was shocked when I heard this number. At this moment, Yi Haomiao was already full of admiration for Bailey Hongzhuang. He thought that under such circumstances, it was already very good that they were not bullied by the D family. He did not expect that they would have the upper hand. Most importantly, even Steward Wu was on their side, and gave D Baichen the identity of a disciple of the Raging Inferno sect. He knew that the Raging Inferno sect had a set of standards for recruitment. He had been very surprised when Bailey Hongzhuang had joined the Raging Inferno sect directly. He had not expected that D Baichen would be even faster. He had become a disciple of the Raging Inferno sect without going through the assessment. Wan Yanhan was not much better than Yi Haomiao. Yes, junior sister is really not simple. I think she must have been a very amazing person when she was in the Punglai Palace. Besides, D Baichen and junior sister are both skilled and bold. No wonder they are a couple. Even he had not dared to speak under such circumstances. But D Baichen had. Logically speaking, D Baichen should have been the person with the least right to speak in such an environment. However, he had spoken fearlessly, as if there was nothing worth worrying about. I find it funny when I think about the D family's expressions just now. This is completely different from the arrogance they had when they first arrived. Originally, I thought that this was a huge problem that would be difficult to solve. But now this feeling has faded a lot. As he spoke, Yi Haomiao couldn't help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang. He knew very well that all these changes were because of Bailey Hongzhuang. If it wasn't for her, she and Wan Yanhan would be in a much more difficult situation now. A person with great skill is bold. This saying was not wrong at all. Bailey Hongzhuang's courage was much greater than theirs. Wu Wenfeng didn't say a word all the way until they reached their residence. Then, he closed the door and looked helplessly at the four young guys in front of him. You knew that the D family would not let this matter rest, yet you still caused such trouble today. Sigh. Wu Wenfeng sighed. He had mixed feelings at the moment. Actually, he cared about Cheng Zonghao the most, not the D family. Steward Wu, we have no choice but to do this today, Wan Yanhan said. Baichen happened to come to find me, but I didn't expect DeVows to receive the news so quickly. That's why this happened. Bailey Hongzhuang explained slowly. They had indeed made things difficult for Wu Wenfeng today, but the situation itself had also exceeded their expectations. Upon hearing this, Wu Wenfeng's eyes couldn't help but fall on D Baichen. He had to admit that D Baichen really looked like the son of a big family. Chapter 4304. Wu Wenfeng calmed down and felt much more at ease. I just didn't think that the Fiery Flames sect would have another new disciple so soon. Steward Wu, D Baichen is actually very powerful. Even DeVows is no match for him. Wan Yanhan hurriedly spoke up. I understand that the Fiery Flames sect has its own set of criteria for recruiting disciples. But he definitely won't disappoint you. He's even more powerful than DeVows. Wu Wenfeng was astonished. He hadn't seen the fight between D Baichen and the D family. He had only thought that D Baichen was too young to reach the Fiery Flames sect's standards. However, when he heard that D Baichen was actually more powerful than DeVows, he couldn't help but be dumbfounded. He also knew that DeVows was at the Star Edge level 8. Given D Baichen's age, if he had reached the Star Edge level 8, his cultivation talent would be too terrifying. Yi Haomiao nodded repeatedly. Yes, DeVows was held hostage by D Baichen just now. There were many witnesses. Steward Wu, given D Baichen's cultivation talent, I'm sure that many forces would be willing to recruit him. Actually, you didn't lose anything by recruiting him this time. Wan Yanhan smiled. He was absolutely right. If Bailey Hongzhuang hadn't been here, the Fiery Flames sect might not have been able to recruit such a person. Wu Wenfeng's gaze toward D Baichen immediately changed. He already knew that Bailey Hongzhuang and D Baichen were husband and wife. Thinking about Bailey Hongzhuang's inscription technique and Di Beichen's cultivation talent, they were a terrifying pair. Did you both just come up from the lower realm? Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. Yes, the cultivators from the lower realm are becoming more and more amazing. Even in the upper realm, very few people can reach your level of cultivation. Wu Wenfeng immediately tossed the displeasure he had in his heart to the back of his mind. He was happy to be able to recruit another outstanding cultivator. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others smiled. They didn't know how the cultivators from the lower realm performed here, but they didn't think they were much worse than the cultivators from the upper realm. Bailey Hongzhuang, as you can see, Master Cheng is very interested in you. Wu Wenfeng looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with a serious expression. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded her head. She could also see this point. On the contrary, Wu Wenfeng seemed to have some scruples when facing the Di family. However, Cheng Zonghao had no scruples at all. I hope you can agree to stay in the Fiery Flame sect. You can tell me if you need anything. Wu Wenfeng's expression was serious. He knew Cheng Zonghao's methods very well. If Cheng Zonghao wanted to find Bailey Hongzhuang, he couldn't stop him even if he wanted to. In that case, he could only communicate with Bailey Hongzhuang first. Otherwise, if Bailey Hongzhuang was poached, it would be very difficult for him to answer to the higher-ups. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly and nodded. Don't worry, Steward Wu. I don't like trouble. Since I have already joined the Fiery Flame sect, I will stay here properly. After hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's affirmative answer, Wu Wenfeng's eyes lit up, and he relaxed a lot. Chapter 4305. Let me know if you need anything. The Fiery Flame sect will do its best to satisfy you. Wu Wenfeng had already thought of all sorts of conditions. However, when he found out that Bailey Hongzhuang had actually made up her mind to stay in the Fiery Flame sect, he suddenly felt that he had been overcomplicating things all this while. It was precisely because Bailey Hongzhuang was so honest that he felt somewhat embarrassed. Perhaps he was too worldly and worried that Bailey Hongzhuang might be poached by Cheng Zonghao. But now the other side's honesty was like a clear stream, making him feel a different feeling. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Steward Wu, you are too polite. We have already caused you a lot of trouble. You have always helped us. I am very grateful. Although she knew that Wu Wenfeng had done all this because he had taken a liking to her inscription technique, this was a very normal thing. No one would bother if they did not have sufficient value. At least, Wu Wenfeng had indeed helped them chase away the trouble of the Di family today. If it had not been for the Fiery Flame sect, it would have been very difficult for them to face the group of cultivators from the Di family. Upon hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the smile on Wu Wenfeng's face gradually widened. If something similar happens in the future, you can inform me first. It will be easier for me to resolve it after I know the situation. Otherwise, it would have been too abrupt like today. Thank you, Steward Wu. However, I don't think something like this will happen again in the future. Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but look at Di Beichen, who was beside her. It was obvious that Xiren and Shangguan Yingying would not be here for a while. Being able to meet Beichen was already the biggest surprise. Di Beichen, right? Now you are a new disciple of the Fiery Flame sect, just like Bailey Hongzhuang. As long as you cultivate well, the Fiery Flame sect will not mistreat any of you. As for this residence, do you want to stay with Bailey Hongzhuang, or do you want to arrange another room? Wu Wenfeng was obviously in an extremely good mood, and his tone was extremely relaxed. I'll share a room with my wife. All right. Wu Wenfeng nodded. By the way, I'm afraid the Di family will not let this matter rest. You'd better stay in the Raging Flame sect, and try not to go out. Steward Wu, don't worry. We won't go out again. That's good. After coming out from Steward Wu's place, Wanyan Han and the others could not help but smile at each other. Today's situation really gave me a fright. I didn't expect that we would be able to avert danger in the end. Wanyan Han shook his head and sighed. Anyway, junior brother D, welcome to the Raging Flames school. It's a pity that we can only stay here for the time being, and can't go to the restaurant to drink and celebrate with you. A faint smile spread across Di Beichen's handsome face. Brother Wanyan, you're too polite. You husband and wife finally reunited. Wan Yin Han, and I won't hold you up. After all, absence makes the heart grow fonder, hee. Yi Haomiao smiled mockingly. After saying goodbye, he pulled Wan Yin Han and left together. Watching Yi Haomiao and Wan Yin Han leave quickly, Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but smile at each other. Di Beichen reached out to hold Bailey Hongzhuang's small hand and smiled from the bottom of his heart. Wife, it's so good to see you again. So good. Chapter 4306. Ever since he arrived in the upper realm, his heart had been empty. He kept thinking about the various dangers that Bailey Hongzhuang might encounter. It was only when he saw Bailey Hongzhuang that he felt completely relieved. It was as if he had come back to life. Bailey Hongzhuang's red lips curled into a bright and brilliant smile. That's right. I thought I didn't know when I would be able to see you again. I didn't expect you to find me so soon. I'm so happy. After returning to the house, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen did not say anything. They only hugged each other tightly. Being close to each other's skin and feeling each other's warmth was the most reassuring thing. Bailey Hongzhuang leaned on Di Beichen's shoulder and asked, Beichen, what kind of inheritance did you receive from the ruins? I received the inheritance of the Dark Force. It turns out that the Dark Force is really powerful. The rumors from the past were not wrong. Di Beichen played with Bailey Hongzhuang's soft and boneless little hand. Those slender fingers and fair skin looked like a work of art. When he held it in his hand, the warm touch made him unwilling to let go. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang sighed. Her guess was right. Di Beichen received the inheritance of the Dark Force. However, the world has a huge misunderstanding about the Dark Force. My master is the owner of the Dark Force ruins. He is the person who controls the Dark Force. He said that the Dark Force itself is a very powerful force. In fact, although the Dark Force existed in the past, it did not cause any harm. It was only later that a cultivator with impure thoughts accidentally used it and caused a disaster. However, since then, everyone thought that the Dark Force was a very evil force. Although my master wanted to change everything, it was too late. No one believed him. Di Beichen slowly narrated the story. When Bailey Hongzhuang heard everything, she could not help but sigh in her heart. Actually, there are still some things that master didn't tell me. He said that my destiny is very similar to his. As for the other things, it wouldn't do me any good to tell me too early. So he sealed that part and said that I would naturally know in the future. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows as a trace of doubt flashed in her eyes. So strange? Di Beichen nodded slightly. Yes, although there are still many things that I don't understand. I know that my master is a very good and upright person. His master's greatest wish was to eliminate everyone's prejudice against the power of darkness. He hoped that one day, the power of darkness would be accepted by everyone. Now he has placed his hopes on me. He hopes that I can do it. Bailey Hongzhuang held Di Beichen's hand. Her eyes were serious and firm. Beichen, I believe you can do it. Di Beichen smiled dotingly. This is a very difficult task. Even someone as powerful as my master couldn't do it. You believe that I can do it? I believe in you. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. I will do my best. I won't let you down. Di Beichen hugged Bailey Hongzhuang again. As long as you are by my side, I have confidence. I will always be here. DeVos and the others returned to the inn with stomachs full of anger. Staying in the room, everyone felt that they had been too aggrieved today. They did not know how to vent their anger. Damn it. Damn that Bailey Hongzhuang. Chapter 4307. I really don't know what's so great about her. Everyone is actually protecting her. DeVos wanted to tear everything in front of him into pieces when he thought of what had happened before. Wu Zhe, we might have underestimated this Bailey Hongzhuang. She's not simple. Di Sudong was also very angry, but he still calmed down and analyzed the matter. The reason why things developed differently from what we expected was entirely because of this Bailey Hongzhuang. Compared to her, Wan Yin Han and Yi Haomiao are really nothing. He wasn't stupid. On the contrary, he was very good at judging the situation. Wan Yin Han and Yi Haomiao obviously didn't have any say in the previous scene. On the contrary, Bailey Hongzhuang took the initiative. Even the new man in white had a certain amount of weight. Then what should we do now? Bailey Hongzhuang has poisoned me. We have to detoxify it as soon as possible. DeVals couldn't help but look at the green mark on his wrist. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but feel anxious. He didn't want to lose his life like this. Bailey Hongzhuang had acted so confidently before. Now that he thought of it, he still felt a little panicked. Hearing DeVal's words, Di Sudong also came back to his senses and said, "Now is indeed not the time to be angry. The most important thing is to detoxify the poison for you first." "Yes." DeVals nodded repeatedly. "We don't know when the poison will take effect. We must detoxify it before it takes effect. You all go find the doctor and poison master now." Di Sudong looked at the others and ordered. "Yes." After everyone left, DeVals couldn't help but ask, "Second uncle, do you think that this poison can't be detoxified by others? Know that Bailey Hongzhuang is just a person from the lower world. How can the doctors from the upper world not be able to detoxify her poison? She just wanted to scare us before, so she acted so arrogantly. We can't give her 100,000 spirit stones, even if we think about it." After DeVals heard Di Sudong's affirmative and comforting words, he couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. That's right. This woman is really asking for an exorbitant price. She must be crazy for spirit stones. Wuxia, don't worry. The doctor will definitely be able to cure the poison. She's just a fellow from the lower realms. Does she really think she's that capable? After I detoxify the poison, I'll go in front of her. Let's see if she can still be as proud as she is today. The D family's cultivators were very efficient. They quickly found a doctor and a poison master. However, they were dumbfounded when they heard what the doctor and the poison master had to say. "I'm sorry, but I've never heard of this poison before. I'm afraid I won't be able to find a way to neutralize it. Young Master D, the poison in your body is very special. I have never seen it in a book. As for the antidote, Young Master D, I'm sorry. I am not capable enough. Doctor, please help me think of another way. I'm really sorry." Di Sudong and DeVals watched the doctors and poison masters leave one by one. Their hearts sank every time they heard a person's words. After all the doctors and poison masters had left, the D family's cultivators' faces turned as red as a pig's liver. Chapter 4308. Di Sudong, who had been full of confidence, was now speechless. Bailey Hongzhuang was telling the truth. No one could cure this poison. How could this be? She's just a cultivator from the lower realm. How could her poison not be cured? Di Sudong's face was full of disbelief. What's with the doctors and poison masters from the upper realm? They can't even cure a poison from the lower realm. Second master, I think that little girl is full of evil energy. Everything that happens to her is strange. Something's not right at all. Another D family disciple could not help but say. Di Sudong frowned. At the moment he had the same thought. Bailey Hongzhuang was too strange. No one could see through her at all. He had thought that it would be easy to get rid of this little girl. However, the situation was now completely obstructed because of her, which made him feel very helpless. Second uncle, what should we do now? DeVals looked at Di Sudong nervously. He was still poisoned, and no one knew when the poison would take effect. If the poison took effect in the next second, would he lose his life? No, he did not want to die yet. Di Sudong's face was gloomy. This little girl has always been so calm. I'm afraid she has already guessed that this would be the result. If we go and find her now, she will definitely be very proud. But if this poison is not cured, I will die. Di Wuxia had an anxious look on his face. 100,000 spirit stones it is. If she doesn't give me the spirit stones, only death awaits me. He no longer suspected that Bailey Hongzhuang was lying to him. Everyone who had come just now had proven that he was really poisoned. However, even those doctors could not say when the poison would take effect. When he saw Di Wuxia's nervous appearance, Di Sudong nodded and said, Wuxia, don't be anxious. Compared to 100,000 spirit stones in your life is naturally more important. Since we can't find a doctor to cure you, let's go find Bailey Hongzhuang. Thank you, second uncle. Di Wuxia heaved a sigh of relief. Compared to losing one's life, losing one's dignity naturally wasn't much. When Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen were resting, someone knocked on the door. The two of them looked at each other, feeling a little puzzled. They didn't know who would come looking for them at this time. As soon as he opened the door, he saw Wang Yanhan and Yi Haomiao standing outside. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were filled with surprise. Didn't you go back? Did something happen? Based on her understanding of Wang Yanhan and Yi Haomiao, they wouldn't disturb them at this time unless something happened. Actually, we didn't want to disturb you. Wang Yanhan looked apologetically at Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang. We just heard that the people from the Di family seem to have come to the Raging Flames sect again, and specifically asked to see junior sister. Hearing Wang Yanhan's words, Bailey Hongzhuang immediately understood, and the corners of her lips curled into a mocking smile. It seems that they can't cure the poison, so they came back to find me. Ah! Yi Haomiao was astonished. They can't cure the poison? Of course. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. Did you think that I was lying? Chapter 4309. It has always been difficult to detoxify Hongzhuang's poison. Di Beichen's handsome face was filled with an indifferent smile. His voice was faintly filled with pride and pride. His wife's means had always been very powerful. Yi Haomiao nodded. Miss Bailey, you really make me see you in a new light time and time again. The Di family is here now. What should we do? Wang Yanhan looked at Bailey Hongzhuang, not knowing what decision she would make. Don't pay attention to them. Bailey Hongzhuang's face was indifferent. This is their choice. She had already given DeVows a chance today, but they had not been willing to believe it. So what if they came again now? You don't want 100,000 spirit stones? Yi Haomiao could not help but ask. 100,000 spirit stones. That was a resource that was extremely difficult to obtain. They usually had a lot of resources in the Raging Flame sect, but they would have to stay here for a long time if they wanted 100,000 spirit stones. Now that 100,000 spirit stones were in front of Bailey Hongzhuang, she actually rejected it so casually? Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Just as she was about to explain, Wang Yanhan could not help but say helplessly, Yi Haomiao, have you forgotten that junior sister is an inscription master? When had an inscription master ever lacked spirit stones? Yi Haomiao only reacted when he heard Wang Yanhan's words. He immediately touched his head helplessly and said, Yes, I'm used to looking at things from my point of view. I forgot that Miss Bailey's status is different. Actually, this is quite good. The Di family has always been so arrogant. Today's incident can be considered a lesson to them, and let them know that they are not the ones who call the shots here. Junior sister, we'll head back first. Okay. Di Sudong and the others stood outside the Raging Flame sect and waited anxiously. Now that DeVows had been poisoned, no one knew when the poison would take effect. Since they had decided to look for Bailey Hongzhuang, it was naturally better to do it as soon as possible. Today, Di Sudong's group had caused quite a commotion in the Raging Flame school. Now that they had returned, the disciples of the Raging Flame school paid close attention to them. However, they didn't know what trouble they were looking for. In my opinion, it will be very difficult for the Di family to deal with Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. I used to think that Di Wentao was very powerful when he was here, but now I don't think so at all. Yin Xiangming and the rest are the ones who are really unlucky. It doesn't matter if the Di family leaves, but they still have to stay in the Raging Flame sect. You can imagine what kind of situation they will face in the future. Faced with the gazes of the surrounding cultivators, the Di family members wanted to cover their faces. Unfortunately, they could not do so. Why hasn't Bailey Hongzhuang come out yet? DeVows furrowed his brows in annoyance. He found it unbearable to stay under these gazes for even a second longer. But Bailey Hongzhuang still hadn't come out. The person who sent the message should have already sent the message. Why hasn't there been any movement after so long? Di Sudong's brows furrowed. Second uncle, that Bailey Hongzhuang shouldn't be unable to put on airs, right? Di Wuxia had a bad premonition in his heart. If it really was like this, then it would be terrible. I don't think so. Di Sudong shook his head. Today, she opened her mouth and asked for 100,000 spirit stones. Obviously, she wants to make a fortune from us. Now that this opportunity is right in front of her, she has no reason to reject it. I think she deliberately slowed down to embarrass us. Chapter 43:10. However, when Yin Xiangming and others came back and told them that Bailey Hongzhuang had chosen to refuse, Di Sudong's face, which was originally quite calm, became extremely ugly. He did not expect that the result would be like this. Are you sure? Bailey Hongzhuang has rejected the offer? DeVows stared at Yin Xiangming in disbelief, wondering if he had heard wrongly. Yin Xiangming's expression was extremely ugly, but he still nodded. Brother Wuxia, we've asked. Bailey Hongzhuang has really rejected the offer. Damn it! DeVows could not help but curse. They had already lowered themselves to look for Bailey Hongzhuang, but Bailey Hongzhuang had still rejected them. This was simply a slap in the face. Di Sudong's expression was also ugly. Previously, he had solemnly vowed that Bailey Hongzhuang would definitely save Ying. He never thought that the other party would be so ruthless in this slap. This Bailey Hongzhuang is really difficult to deal with, Di Sudong said in a low voice. He had thought that 100,000 spirit stones would be enough to move Bailey Hongzhuang. He never thought that the other party would be so patient. Second uncle, what should we do? DeVows had no idea at this moment. Bailey Hongzhuang had his life in her hands. Di Sudong's expression was ashen, but he did not know what to do at this moment. If Bailey Hongzhuang did not come out to see them, then they could not do anything. Yin Xiangming, bring us to Steward Wu. Di Sudong sighed. It seemed that they were destined to be humiliated today. If Bailey Hongzhuang was determined not to give them the antidote, then their only hope was Wu Wenfeng. He only hoped that Bailey Hongzhuang would be willing to listen to Wu Wenfeng's words. After all, even if they were humiliated, it was not as important as DeVows' life. All right. Yin Xiangming hurriedly nodded and led DeVows and the others into the Raging Flame sect. When Wu Wenfeng saw that Di Sudong and the others had come again, he could not help but feel a burst of irritation in his heart. Now, as long as he saw the Di clan, he felt that it was troublesome. Not only that, but looking at Yin Xiangming and the other two who were leading the way, he also felt extremely annoyed. If it weren't for them, this matter wouldn't have become so complicated. Steward Wu, I apologize for disturbing you at night. Di Sudong's face was full of smiles, and his attitude was completely different from before. When he saw that the other party's attitude was somewhat restrained, Wu Wenfeng's expression became a little better. He said, Brother Di, may I know what has caused you to make a special trip here at night? I have a presumptuous request that I would like to ask Steward Wu for help. Di Sudong cupped his hands. If it weren't for the fact that we had no other way, we wouldn't have come to disturb you at night. I hope that Steward Wu can help us. Brother Di, you're too polite. What's the matter? As long as it's something that I can help with, I will definitely help. Bailey Hongzhuang poisoned Wu Zhe. I hope that Brother Di can help us get the antidote, Di Sudong said helplessly. When he heard that, Wu Wenfeng's expression changed, and his eyes flickered with astonishment. You didn't manage to get rid of Bailey Hongzhuang's poison? Di Sudong shook his head, looking somewhat embarrassed. We really underestimated Bailey Hongzhuang. We didn't expect her poison to be so powerful. We found many doctors and poison masters, but they couldn't get rid of it. Chapter 43:11. When Wu Wenfeng finished listening to Di Sudong's narration, his expression became a little strange. The Di family was considered quite powerful in the upper realm. However, they were now in a terrible fix because of a cultivator who had just arrived in the upper realm. When he recalled how arrogant they had been when they had first arrived at the Raging Flame sect, and how they were now begging for help, even he could not help but have an illusion. Steward Wu, I'll leave this matter to you. You must help us. Wentao is no longer around. If something happens to Wu Wentao, the Di family will not be able to bear it. Di Sudong said earnestly. The Di family had been enraged by Di Wentao's mishap. That was why so many of them had come to Rong'an City. They had wanted to seek justice for Di Wentao in a dignified manner. Who would have thought that such a situation would occur? At the very least, he had to ensure that DeVos was safe and sound. Otherwise, he would not know how to face his family members if he returned like this. Wu Wenfeng looked at Di Sudong and the others and was filled with emotions. His initial dissatisfaction with the Di family gradually dissipated. In fact, the Di family was not the only one who would be unable to bear such a huge difference. Brother Di, I will persuade Bailey Hongzhuang, Wu Wenfeng said. Di Sudong's eyes lit up when he heard Wu Wenfeng's words. He hurriedly thanked him. Steward Wu, thank you so much for being willing to help. You're welcome. Wu Wenfeng waved his hand. Di Wentao is also a disciple of the Raging Flame sect. We did not want to see this happen either. After a short conversation, Wu Wenfeng led the Di family to Bailey Hongzhuang's residence. Initially, he had intended to go alone. However, after seeing how anxious the members of the Di family were, he had decided to bring them along. However, he was not sure whether Bailey Hongzhuang would agree or not. Wife, there seems to be a lot of people walking towards us. Di Beichen held Bailey Hongzhuang in his arms, looking confident. He wanted to have a good time with Bailey Hongzhuang tonight. But he didn't expect that things would come one after another. Bailey Hongzhuang narrowed her eyes. She had also heard the footsteps in the distance. It seems like the Di family still came knocking on my door after I rejected them. Di Beichen's lips curled into a devilish smile. As expected, DeVos's position in their team is very high. Since they can't cure the poison, they can't let anything happen to him. Naturally, they can only look for him. But they should know that it's impossible for me to agree. Bailey Hongzhuang frowned. The Di family had already eaten a lot of things in front of her. How could they still dare to run over like this? Di Beichen chuckled. His deep eyes flickered with a wise light. If I'm not wrong, they must have invited Steward Wu. After all, they can't bear the consequences of such a big thing. Hearing his words, Bailey Hongzhuang's face turned a bit more serious. What you said really makes sense. The only possibility now is Steward Wu. Wife, if Steward Wu has really brought people here, you have to think carefully about how to deal with him. Di Beichen squeezed Bailey Hongzhuang's small hand. Although a large group of people was about to arrive, they were not worried at all. Chapter 43:12. Knock knock knock. As expected, someone knocked on the door. Di Beichen was the first to open the door. Di Beichen's eyes lit up when he saw Wu Wenfeng, who was at the front of the group. Steward Wu. Bailey Hongzhuang walked to Di Beichen's side with a kind and calm smile on her exquisite face. Please come in. Wu Wenfeng sighed inwardly when he saw Bailey Hongzhuang's calm expression. It seemed that everything was within Bailey Hongzhuang's expectations. If Bailey Hongzhuang had not admitted it herself, he would not have believed that this intelligent and resourceful woman had come from the lower realm. Di Sudong and the rest, especially DeVos, felt extremely conflicted when they saw Bailey Hongzhuang. The person he was most unwilling to show weakness to was Bailey Hongzhuang. However, his life was now in Bailey Hongzhuang's hands. There was no way he could refuse to admit defeat. It was extremely terrible. The atmosphere became extremely awkward when the group of Di family cultivators walked into the room. Both parties did not say a word. The room was filled with people, but there was no sound at all. Bailey Hongzhuang sat down after pouring a cup of tea for Wu Wenfeng. Her expression was calm and indifferent. She was not anxious at all when the other party did not speak. Di Sudong and the rest also remained silent. They could speak softly in front of Wu Wenfeng, but they could not do so in front of Bailey Hongzhuang. When he saw this, Wu Wenfeng could not help but speak first. Bailey Hongzhuang, you should have guessed the purpose of my visit today. I hope that you can hand over the antidote. The Di family was indeed the one who started the fight today. They are very apologetic. However, it would be troublesome if lives were lost. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her brows when she heard this. Her gaze then landed on Di Sudong and the rest behind Wu Wenfeng. Apologetic? The way they are acting, I really don't see any apology at all. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's mocking expression, DeVos and the others couldn't help but clench their fists. They couldn't wait to rush up and kill Bailey Hongzhuang. Unfortunately, the other party had grasped their weakness, so they could only endure it. Miss Bailey, I'm very sorry about what happened today. Di Sudong said slowly. He looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with a very calm gaze, as if he was really apologetic about what had happened today. However, the trace of hatred in the depths of his eyes was deep and suppressed. It was obvious that he had suppressed all his emotions in his heart. Bailey Hongzhuang noticed the look in her eyes, but did not point it out. In any case, there was no possibility of reconciliation between them. Even if the other party sincerely apologized, she would still ignore it. After Di Sudong finished speaking, he realized that Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze had stopped on DeVos. It was obvious that DeVos had not apologized. When he saw this, Di Sudong could not help but nudge DeVos. DeVos then said unwillingly, I was presumptuous today. I hope that Miss Bailey will be magnanimous enough to forgive me and give me the antidote. The smile on Bailey Hongzhuang's lips gradually widened. Although the other party's apology was fake, she felt that it was pretty good that he could suppress their arrogance. Chapter 43:13. Bailey Hongzhuang, they've already apologized. Why don't you hand over the antidote? Wu Wenfeng stared at Bailey Hongzhuang. If it was an ordinary disciple, he could directly order them. But the other party was Bailey Hongzhuang, so he could not do so. Steward Wu, since you've personally come, I naturally have to give you face. Once these words were spoken, Wu Wenfeng, Di Sudong and the rest all heaved a sigh of relief. Bailey Hongzhuang had finally agreed. However, before the smiles on their faces bloomed, Bailey Hongzhuang's words stunned them once again. I can hand over the antidote, but the compensation is also necessary. 150,000 spirit stones. Hand it over, and I'll give you the antidote. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Di Sudong and the rest were all dumbfounded. 150,000 spirit stones? Wasn't it 100,000 spirit stones previously? They had finally accepted the price of 100,000 spirit stones with great difficulty. Now, Bailey Hongzhuang had opened her mouth and raised it by 50,000. Could it be that she thought that it was so easy to obtain these tens of thousands of spirit stones? Miss Bailey, did you remember wrongly? Di Sudong suppressed the unhappiness in his heart and asked tentatively. Today you clearly said that it was 100,000 spirit stones. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. That's right. During the day, I've already said that it was 100,000 spirit stones. If it wasn't 100,000 spirit stones, I wouldn't hand over the antidote. However, at that time you rejected it. Now that you want this antidote, then I'll raise the price by 50,000 spirit stones. So 150,000 spirit stones is not wrong. Bailey Hongzhuang's expression was innocent. She was clearly cheating people, but her appearance was extremely naive. She was already so black-hearted that no one could compete with her. But she still felt that her transaction was especially worth it. For a moment, Di Sudong and the rest felt that they could not help but curse. They had mingled around here for so long, and had never seen such a shameless person. Bewitching sat next to Bailey Hongzhuang. His extraordinarily handsome face was filled with a faint smile. His wife was as smart as ever. Her methods of doing business were becoming more and more outstanding. It seemed that he had taught her well during this period of time. Steward Wu, this. Di Sudong could not help but look at Wu Wenfeng, only hoping that Wu Wenfeng could speak up for them. 100,000 spirit stones. It was already a huge loss for them to take it out. Now that Bailey Hongzhuang had added another 50,000 spirit stones, they really couldn't bear it. Hearing this, Hongzhuang. 150,000 spirit stones. 100,000 spirit stones is not a small sum. Is the price. Steward Wu, this is how I always settle accounts. This is my style. Bailey Hongzhuang's expression was calm. There are a lot of things that some people don't know the value of and give up. But when they know the benefits, they come back. How can it be the same price? 2. If Hong's Tess, I not, is. Teat, A. Hong, not. Can you be any more exaggerated? A cultivator from the lower realm, speaking in such a tone. Was she really not afraid of biting her tongue? Even though they were cursing endlessly in their hearts, at this moment, They could only swallow it back, not daring to speak. Chapter 43:14. This, Wu Wenfeng opened his mouth but didn't know what to say. Since Bailey Hongzhuang had already said so much, it seemed like there was no point for him to say anything else. At this thought, Wu Wenfeng could not help but look at Di Sudong and the others. He wanted to help but could not. Previously, Bailey Hongzhuang had already rejected him. Now that he had come, he wanted to make Bailey Hongzhuang be willing to hand over the antidote. As for the price that he had to pay, there was nothing he could do about it. When they saw Wu Wenfeng's expression, Di Sudong and the others' hearts sank. It seemed like they had no other choice but to hand over the 150,000 spirit stones. However, that was 150,000 spirit stones. In their Di family, this was also a huge sum of money. Now they had to hand it over just like that. Their hearts were bleeding. Di Sudong could not help but look at DeVos. He really regretted it. If he had not let DeVos come out alone this afternoon, this would not have happened, and they would not have suffered such a huge loss. Unfortunately, there was no turning back now. DeVos' mood was also very bad. However, he was more afraid of Di Sudong's rejection. Second uncle, there is no other way. DeVos shook his head. He was really worried that if they continued to bargain, Bailey Hongzhuang would directly raise the price to 200,000 spirit stones, or not pay at all. In that case, they would really be finished. All right. Di Sudong gritted his teeth and nodded. 150,000 spirit stones it is. However, you need to give us some time. We only have 100,000 spirit stones on us now. Can you give us the antidote first? He did not want to obey Li Hongzhuang, but they had come this time to avenge Di Wentao, and had not expected to stay here for long. Naturally, they did not have many spirit stones on them. 100,000 spirit stones was all that they had. As for the remaining 50,000 spirit stones, they simply couldn't afford it. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows and looked at Di Sudong. Her meaning was obvious. Are you going to go back on your word? Steward Wu, believe me, I will definitely take out the 50,000 spirit stones, Di Sudong said. The Di family will not renege on a debt. Wu Wenfeng nodded and turned to look at Bailey Hongzhuang. I can guarantee that the Di family will not go back on their word. Why don't you give them the antidote first? Since Steward Wu has said so, I will naturally agree. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded and immediately took out a white porcelain bottle and placed it on the table. The antidote is here. Di Sudong took out a Qingquan bag and placed it on the table. There are 100,000 spirit stones here. You can take a look. Bailey Hongzhuang opened it and saw that it was full of spirit stones. A satisfied smile appeared on her face. Okay. After coming out of Bailey Hongzhuang's house, Wu Wenfeng and the others walked all the way. The atmosphere was a little tense. Brother Di, Bailey Hongzhuang's temper is like this. I can only help you to this extent. I am really sorry. Wu Wenfeng cupped his fists, his voice filled with helplessness. He had seen Bailey Hongzhuang's temper today. Although she was young, she was definitely not someone to be trifled with. The Di family had suffered a huge setback because of her, not to mention the rest of the family. Steward Wu, don't say that. Actually, you have already helped us a lot. Di Sudong cupped his fists. We will head back first then. Chapter 43:15. After bidding farewell to Wu Wenfeng, DeVos immediately consumed the antidote. He only felt relieved when he realized that the green color on his wrist had disappeared. My life is finally not in danger. DeVos heaved a sigh of relief. He recalled everything that had happened. Fortunately, he had brought the antidote back. Otherwise, he would have had to accompany Di Wentao. However, after the poison was detoxified, Di Wuxia remembered Bailey Hongzhuang's arrogant expression before, and his face suddenly became gloomy. Bailey Hongzhuang is still so arrogant in front of Wu Wenfeng. She's really unreasonable. Di Sudong's face was so dark that it could drip water. 150,000 spirit stones. She really dared to ask for it. Second uncle, we definitely can't give her so many spirit stones, DeVos said unwillingly. She's so detestable. Won't she be even more arrogant with these spirit stones? Of course we can't let her get away with it. Di Sudong's face was sinister. We'll give her the spirit stones, but it depends on whether she's alive to use them. Upon hearing Di Sudong's words, DeVos could not help but be stunned. Then he asked curiously, "Second uncle, what do you mean by that?" "You'll find out soon enough." The next day, the news that the Di family had submitted to Bailey Hongzhuang spread, causing an uproar in the entire Blazing Flames sect. 100,000 spirit stones, that was something everyone dreamed of. But Bailey Hongzhuang was able to get it so easily. Everyone couldn't help but be envious. When Bailey Hongzhuang woke up, she realized that many cultivators were smiling at her. This was a completely different situation from when she had just joined the Blazing Flames sect. "Wife, you're very popular in the Blazing Flames sect." Di Beichen smiled. This situation was much better than when Bailey Hongzhuang was in the lower realm. Bailey Hongzhuang noticed the expressions of the people around her and couldn't help but smile. They should know about what happened yesterday, so they decided to express their goodwill to me. It wasn't like this a few days ago. The news about the Raging Flames sect spread pretty quickly. No matter what, this is a good sign. In my opinion, the Di family will not let this matter rest so easily. They will feel the pinch for 150,000 spirit stones. Now that they've fallen into my hands, they must be very unwilling. Bailey Hongzhuang looked carefree. Although she had not interacted with the Di family for a long time, she knew that they were not gentlemen based on what had happened during this period of time. Then let them come. The smile on Di Beichen's lips remained unchanged, but a storm was brewing in his eyes. If they still don't know what's good for them and come over, I'll make sure they don't return. Daring to cause trouble for his wife, he would definitely not let him off easily. It would be fine if they left just like that. However, if they came to cause trouble again, he would make them all accompany Di Wentao. In the next few days, Bailey Hongzhuang had a few carefree days. The Di family had quieted down and did not cause any trouble. More and more new disciples have come to report. Tomorrow is the new disciple assembly. You can take advantage of this opportunity to see the attributes you have awakened. Chapter 43:16. Upon hearing Wang Yanhan's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen smiled and nodded. However, when the two of them looked at each other, their gazes were somewhat complicated. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen had already discussed this issue. They both believed that Di Beichen would awaken the darkness attribute. After all, he had received the darkness inheritance and possessed the power of darkness. It was impossible for him not to awaken the darkness attribute. For Di Beichen, he did not feel that there was anything wrong with the darkness attribute. On the contrary, he felt that it was natural for him to awaken the darkness attribute. However, the darkness attribute was discriminated against in the upper realm. Once he awakened the darkness attribute in front of everyone, it would probably be a little troublesome. "Wife, you don't have to worry about me." Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's worried expression, Di Beichen could not help but comfort her. "Actually, there's nothing wrong with the darkness attribute. I promised Master that I would change the way the cultivators in the upper realm view the power of darkness. If I still care about other people's opinions, how can I fulfill Master's request?" Di Beichen was very calm. He did not care about everyone's strange gazes. Moreover, he was not the only one in the upper realm who had the darkness attribute. Bailey Hongzhuang frowned. "But this way, you'll have to bear some unnecessary pressure." "It's okay. You didn't often bear such gazes and pressure in the past. If you don't mind, I'm your husband. Do you think I can't stand it?" Di Beichen smiled faintly, but he held Bailey Hongzhuang's hand tightly. "I know that no matter what, you'll always be by my side. To me, other people are no different from radishes and cabbages. Do you think I'll care about their gazes and opinions?" Looking at Di Beichen's indifferent expression, especially after hearing the analogy of radishes and cabbages, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but chuckle. Radishes and cabbages. If those female disciples who adore you knew that they were radishes and cabbages in your eyes, they would probably die of anger, right? So what? Di Beichen spread out his hands. His eyes were affectionate. "In this world, except for you, my wife, All other women are like radishes and cabbages in my eyes. Beichen, why don't you not awaken here? Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Di Beichen worriedly. As long as they didn't awaken here, they could go somewhere else to secretly awaken. The situation might be better. Wife, don't worry. I'm fine. Di Beichen rubbed Bailey Hongzhuang's head with emotion. So what if everyone knows? That's what I wanted everyone to know. Actually, the situation isn't as bad as you think. It's been a long time since that incident. Many cultivators have already forgotten about it. The reason why everyone disdained the power of darkness was undoubtedly because the inheritance of the power of darkness had disappeared. It was very difficult to achieve anything in the power of darkness. However, this doesn't apply to me. I've already received the inheritance of the dark force, and I have my ways to further improve myself. I believe that everyone will change their minds sooner or later. Bailey Hongzhuang stared at Di Beichen. After seeing that Di Beichen was not worried at all, she was relieved. Since you've decided to do this, I will definitely support you. Thank you, my wife. Chapter 43:17. Today, the awakening ceremony for the new disciples would be held here. Almost all the cultivators in the House of Flames would be there to watch the show. When Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen appeared, they immediately attracted the attention of all the cultivators present. The crowd saw a man and a woman dressed in white walking over gracefully. They were like a celestial couple from a painting. Their outstanding looks and otherworldly auras were enough to make one feel suffocated. When Di Beichen first appeared in the House of Flames, the crowd was already shocked by his appearance. He was like a piece of jade, and the young master was unparalleled. Such a suave and elegant young master directly refreshed the crowd's understanding of handsome men. Even though he already had Bailey Hongzhuang by his side, there were still many women who admired him, and even took the initiative to express their goodwill. Although he was only a cultivator from the lower realm, the power he displayed that day was enough for everyone to be certain that he would obtain a good position in the upper realm in the future. However, Di Beichen seemed to have placed all his attention on Bailey Hongzhuang. Although many women expressed their goodwill, he did not pay any attention to them. At this moment, the person who attracted the most attention was the woman next to Di Beichen. The woman was dressed in a simple white gauze dress. Her graceful and slender figure was curvaceous, and her slender waist could not be held with one arm. As she walked, she swayed gracefully. When the crowd saw her face, many words quickly flashed across their minds, captivating the birds and alighting geese, overshadowing the moon and putting the flowers to shame. Her appearance was like a masterpiece carved by the heavens. Her skin was sparkling and translucent, and her facial features were exquisite beyond compare. Even when she did not smile, it was enough to make people forget their steps. Occasionally, she would smile at Di Beichen, making the crowd forget to breathe. Who is this woman? Isn't Di Beichen Bailey Hongzhuang's husband? Why is he walking so intimately with another woman? This woman's style of dressing is very similar to Bailey Hongzhuang. However, Bailey Hongzhuang does not have such outstanding looks. Everyone stared at the two people in a daze, their hearts filled with doubt. However, regardless of whether they were men or women, the cultivators present had the same thought. They hated that they could not separate the two of them. That way they would have someone to pursue. Yi Haomiao was dumbfounded when he saw this. What's going on? How could Di Beichen be with someone else? How can he face Miss Bailey like this? Although he also felt that there was a gap between Bailey Hongzhuang's appearance and Di Beichen's, and the woman in front of him was obviously more compatible with Di Beichen. But Di Beichen was already Bailey Hongzhuang's husband. How could he do such a thing? Therefore, Yi Haomiao immediately stood up for Bailey Hongzhuang. Looking at Yi Haomiao's indignant look, Wang Yanhan couldn't help but smile. She's little junior sister. She's little junior sister? Yi Haomiao sneered. However, when he realized Wang Yanhan's words, his expression instantly changed. What did you say? This woman is Miss Bailey? That's right. Wang Yanhan nodded. For safety reasons, little junior sister is a newcomer. With her looks, I'm afraid that she'll cause a lot of trouble. Chapter 43:18. In the past, when Bailey Hongzhuang did what she did, he also agreed. Thinking back to the first time he saw Bailey Hongzhuang, he still remembered how he felt. No man would be able to restrain his heart from falling for such a peerless woman. Fortunately, Bewitching's strength was strong enough. In the Raging Flame Gate, there would be no problem protecting Bailey Hongzhuang. Don't you think this is good? Wang Yanhan raised his eyebrows. They look more compatible like this. I think no matter who the other party is, they wouldn't look as compatible as they do. After Yi Haomiao understood all this, he couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. His expression was extremely complicated. Previously, I thought that Miss Bailey didn't look too compatible with Bewitching in terms of appearance. Now it seems that I was overthinking. But you're right. They really look like a match made in heaven. There are so many cultivators here today. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the sea of people in front of her. The Raging Flame School was a very big force in Rong'an City, and had always had a large number of cultivators. But now that everyone had gathered together, she realized that the number was really shocking. Today's awakening ceremony for the new disciples is very important, so everyone rushed over. This situation is very normal. Bewitching smiled faintly. Soon, Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching walked over to Wang Yanhan and Yi Haomiao. Senior brother, Yi Haomiao, you're actually here earlier than us. As senior disciples, we're responsible for maintaining order today, so we came very early. Wang Yanhan smiled. I see. Bailey Hongzhuang understood. Wang Yanhan had always been valued by Wu Wenfeng. Otherwise, he wouldn't have given him the position of team leader. Almost all the new disciples are here. You should go in quickly. The awakening ceremony will begin soon. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching nodded slightly and walked into the group of new disciples. At this moment, the new disciples were standing in a rectangular formation. In front of them was a high platform. Obviously, this was where the leader and steward would appear later. As for the senior disciples who were watching, they were now at the outermost circle. Although they were only here to watch the show, everyone still maintained good order. When Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching walked into the group of new disciples, they immediately became the focus of the new disciples. These two are actually new disciples? I think many senior disciples know them. How can they be new disciples? This is really strange. I'm afraid these two are influential figures. They're not simple at all. Everyone looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with a complicated expression. They had just reported in a few days, and there were still many things they didn't know about the Raging Flames Gate. They didn't expect that Bailey Hongzhuang had already been familiar with everything. Chapter 43:19. Several seats were placed on the high platform. The sect master arrived at the high platform and looked down at the group of young disciples. His eyes flickered with a satisfied light. Today is the awakening ceremony for the new disciples. It's also a welcoming ceremony for the new disciples. I'm very happy that you've chosen to join the Fiery Flames sect. From now on, this will be another home for you. Following the sect leader's words, all the cultivators present began to applaud. The Fiery Flames sect has always been fair in its rewards and punishments. Disciples who perform well will receive generous rewards, while disciples who make mistakes will definitely be punished. I hope that you'll abide by the Fiery Flame sect's rules. As long as you work hard in your cultivation, you'll definitely achieve great things in the future. Yes, the sect master's words were short, but he reminded everyone of the things that they needed to pay attention to. Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching looked at each other. They were not unfamiliar with this statement. Wu Wenfeng's gaze also fell on Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching. When he saw Bailey Hongzhuang's face, his expression changed, and confusion appeared in the space between his brows. However, he quickly regained his composure. Clearly, he had suppressed his doubts. Clearly, now was not the time to ask about this. It would not be too late for him to ask after the awakening ceremony. Following the sect master's instructions, Wu Wenfeng walked to the front and spoke about some matters related to the new disciples. Only then did the sect master announce, "The awakening ceremony will now begin." Following the sect master's announcement, the atmosphere changed abruptly. Every new disciple's eyes flickered with anticipation and nervousness. This was undoubtedly an extremely complicated feeling. On one hand, they hoped that they would awaken a powerful attribute. On the other hand, they were worried that the attribute they awakened would not meet their expectations, or that they would not be able to awaken it at all. Everyone was immersed in their dilemma. They discussed amongst themselves, worried about their own attributes. Wife, what attribute do you think you'll awaken? Bewitching's lips hooked up in a charming smile, looking at Bailey Hongzhuang with a smile that wasn't a smile. Everyone's so nervous, but you're not worried at all. Bailey Hongzhuang pursed her lips and couldn't help but shake her head and chuckle. What do I have to worry about? Even a dark-type person like you isn't worried here. Even if I awaken the dark type, at most I'll be the same as you. I won't be too far off. My wife is really open-minded. If that's really the case, isn't that great? That way, we'll be husband and wife of the dark attribute. How compatible would that be? Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes lit up and she nodded. That's not a bad idea. It would be great if we could all awaken the darkness attribute. If it was in the past, perhaps she would be a little worried because of this attribute. But now that Bewitching was with her, she was not worried at all. Even if it was the worst-case scenario, so what? Along the way, had he not experienced many such things? As long as there was someone by her side, nothing else was scary. I actually hope that my wife can awaken other attributes. I can't bear for my wife to be criticized by others. Bewitching's eyes were filled with deep affection. He did not care about his own situation. The only thing he cared about was Bailey Hongzhuang. He did not wish for gossip to hurt Bailey Hongzhuang. That was something he could not accept. Chapter 43:20. According to Wang Yanhan and the others, some cultivators would have their own premonitions, such as which attribute they were closer to. However, this did not apply to Bailey Hongzhuang. She had never felt that she was particularly close to any attribute. Then, do you have an attribute that you like? I do. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. The darkness attribute. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Bewitching laughed involuntarily. He looked at her helplessly and said, Then I'm even more excited to see what attribute you'll awaken next. Immediately after, Bailey Hongzhuang noticed that a huge crystal ball had appeared on the high platform. The white crystal ball was sparkling and translucent. Under the sunlight, it reflected a charming luster. It was overflowing with light, and was very beautiful. This should be the instrument for awakening an attribute. Bewitching stared at the crystal ball in front of him. His eyes were shining brightly. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. When I was in the lower realm, I never heard of this. The upper realm and the lower realm are really very different. I hope that everyone can come to the upper realm in the future. The development here will always be better. Bewitching's gaze was distant and deep. When he was in the lower realm, he thought that they were already a group of extremely outstanding people. Now, as his horizons were constantly broadening, his thoughts were constantly changing. Whether it was Bailey Hongzhuang's parents or master and mistress, they were all people with outstanding talent. If they came to the upper realm, their strength would definitely rise to another level. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. She also thought of her parents and family. Originally, I only planned to wait for your physique to change before going back. I didn't expect that so many unforeseen events would happen. Now, I don't know when I'll be able to go back. In fact, she knew that her family had always been thinking about them. Now that they had not gone back for so long, they must miss them very much. It was just that things had developed in the opposite direction. Given the current situation, she really did not know when she would be able to return. Noticing Bailey Hongzhuang's gloomy mood, Bewitching couldn't help but hold her hand and said, Don't worry too much. Since Siren knows that we are here, he will definitely help us pass the news back. I've been his brother for so many years, and he's always been reliable. Although the situation at that time was somewhat unexpected, he knew that we had come to the upper realm, so he would definitely take care of the follow-up. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. Xiren and Yingying are indeed very reliable. Whether it was when Xiren or Shengguan Yingying, they were both smart people and had strong adaptability. Presumably, they would know what to do after they understood everything. Don't worry, we will definitely be able to go back. Bewitching's eyes flashed with a resolute light. Although it was not easy to return from the upper realm, he firmly believed that they would be able to return. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. Right now, she hoped that Ao Lingxiao would be able to come to the upper realm as soon as possible. As long as Ao Lingxiao met up with them, they would be able to find the D family. If Bewitching was really a member of the D family, then it would not be a problem for them to return to the lower realm. Right now, this was clearly the fastest way. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching were conversing, the first cultivator had already walked up the stage. Chapter 43:21. Hearing Steward Wu's words, the cultivator immediately nodded, then placed his hand on the crystal ball, and fell into meditation. Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest focused their attention on the crystal ball. Until now, they still didn't know what the awakening process of the attribute looked like. As the man gradually channeled his elemental energy into the crystal ball, they realized that there were some changes in the crystal ball that had been calm all this while. Then, a bright flame appeared in the crystal ball. Bright flames danced in the transparent crystal ball, making it look very beautiful. Fire attribute, Wu Wenfeng immediately announced. After the man who was awakening heard this, a joyful smile appeared on his face. The fire attribute was considered one of the most powerful attributes among the many attributes. Usually, cultivators who awaken this attribute would develop in the direction of destructive power in the future. If they encountered a cultivator with a weaker attribute, they would be completely crushed. Fire attribute level 5. Wu Wenfeng looked at the depth of the flame's color and determined its talent level in the fire attribute. I heard that the attribute level is divided into 10 levels. Level 1 to 3 are ordinary, level 4 to 6 are intermediate, and level 7 is considered extremely powerful. Above level 7, every level means that the attribute talent is more powerful, and the speed of cultivation will be much faster than cultivators of other levels. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows. She knew this from Wanyan Han. In that case, level 5 isn't very outstanding, but it's still pretty good. Bewitching said slowly. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. That's right. Look at that cultivator, isn't he very happy? Looking in the direction that Bailey Hongzhuang pointed at, Bewitching saw that the cultivator had a joyful smile on his face and walked down the stage happily. Obviously, he was very satisfied with this result. Next, Wu Wenfeng called out the names of the cultivators, who were awakening one after another. Water attribute. Water attribute level 3. After Bailey Hongzhuang's observation, she found that as long as a cultivator reached the middle level, they would be satisfied. On the other hand, cultivators with ordinary aptitudes would be disappointed. After all, this kind of level was really too low. It would be more difficult for him to achieve higher attributes in the future. Although cultivation was inseparable from hard work, talent was equally important. Even with the same amount of effort, high-level cultivators would be able to achieve twice the results with half the effort. Wind attribute grade 7. When Wu Wenfeng identified one of the cultivators as a level 7 wind attribute cultivator, the crowd could not help but exclaim in surprise. Everyone looked at the man in surprise. There was no lack of envy in their eyes. He actually reached the 7th level of the wind element. How enviable! With such an innate attribute rank, no matter which power he joins, he'll be highly sought after. It goes without saying that he'll become an influential figure in the Blazing Sect. It's too difficult to have a cultivation talent above level 6. I'm afraid we don't have such good talent. While everyone was envious, they were also a little disappointed. They only hated that they didn't have such talent. Chapter 43:22. Since Wanyan Han is valued so highly by Manager Wu, his talent shouldn't be bad. Bewitching smiled faintly. If a practitioner from the lower realm wanted to get attention, he would have to put in more effort. Therefore, Wanyan Han's level shouldn't be bad. On the contrary, he should be very outstanding. That's right. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. Look, That level 7 wind attribute practitioner's name has been recorded. I'm afraid that his treatment in the future won't be the same as ordinary practitioners. The so-called fairness was only within a certain range. There was no absolute fairness in this world. Bailey Hongzhuang and manager Wu were very clear about this point. Just like how everyone's cultivation talent was different, it was already unfair from the moment they were born. Bewitching. After waiting for a while, it was finally Bewitching's turn. Bewitching. Bailey Hongzhuang frowned slightly, her expression filled with worry. Although Bewitching kept saying that it didn't matter, she couldn't help but be worried. Once everyone knew that Bewitching's talent attribute was darkness, they would probably look at him differently. Wife, don't worry. Bewitching looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with a smile. After giving her a reassuring look, he walked up the stage. Don't think about anything. Just slowly channel your elemental energy into the crystal ball. Manager Wu smiled at Bewitching. Ever since he knew that Bewitching's strength could compete with Devao's, Wu Wenfeng was very optimistic about Bewitching. Therefore, his attitude was more enthusiastic than ordinary practitioners. Thank you for your reminder, Manager Wu. Bewitching then placed both his hands on the crystal ball. As his elemental energy gradually flowed out, an incomparably gloomy black energy appeared in the crystal ball. The originally sparkling and translucent crystal ball seemed to have been swallowed by darkness in an instant. The entire ball presented an extreme darkness, like ink, so thick that it could not be diluted. When Wu Wenfeng saw the black shadow appear, he felt as if someone was strangling him, making him unable to say a word. The entire martial arts stage fell into a deathly silence. Everyone stared blankly at the crystal ball that was filled with the darkness attribute. They stared at the tall white figure in disbelief. They couldn't connect Bewitching to this dark power. Oh my god, am I seeing things? Did Bewitching awaken the power of darkness? His dark energy seems to be very dense. Even the wind elemental cultivators, who had reached the 7th level, couldn't reach this level. Then, how strong is his dark elemental power? This level has practically filled up the entire crystal ball. I'm afraid it has reached the highest level, right? Everyone discussed animatedly. Such a dense scene simply refreshed everyone's understanding. At this moment, Wu Wenfeng was completely dumbfounded. He never thought that Bewitching would awaken the dark elemental power. Moreover, it seemed that the density of the dark elemental power was simply unheard of. After seeing this scene, the sect master's eyes couldn't help but freeze. When he looked at Bewitching again, his expression became complicated. He's the practitioner you just recruited? Hearing the sect master's question, Wu Wenfeng quickly replied, yes, that's him. Chapter 43-23. His talent for cultivation is indeed very strong. The sect master nodded. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such a dense attribute level. It's a pity. If it wasn't for the dark attribute, he would definitely be a rare genius. Sect master, what exactly is his level? Wu Wenfeng couldn't help but look at the sect master. Even he had never seen such a dense attribute level, so he couldn't determine it for a moment. Maximum level. The sect master stared at Bewitching in front of him. Even he had only heard of such a level in rumors. He didn't expect to see a real one in front of him. It wasn't until he saw it with his own eyes that he realized that all of this was actually true. A cultivator with a maximum level of attribute level really existed. Following the sect master's words, Wu Wenfeng and the others on the high platform couldn't help but be dumbfounded. When they looked at Bewitching again, their eyes were filled with shock. Maximum level? That was a legendary existence. It was said that a cultivator with a maximum level of talent could cultivate much faster than ordinary cultivators. Once such a cultivator appeared, they were all geniuses and left a deep mark in history. However, one actually appeared in front of them. At this moment, Wang Yanhan and Yi Haomiao were also staring at Bewitching in a daze. They had never expected Bewitching to have the dark attribute. How could this be? Yi Haomiao was dumbfounded. He had said before that no matter what attribute Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had, as long as it wasn't the dark attribute, there would be no problem. However, such a small probability actually happened. Bewitching actually had the dark attribute. Bewitching's dark attribute seems to be different from ordinary dark attributes. Look at the color, it's really too dense. Manager Wu and the others also have strange expressions. So what if his talent in the dark attribute is amazing? Don't forget that it's the dark attribute. Yi Haomiao couldn't help but remind them. Just the presence of the dark attribute here was already very bad. Below the high platform, Bailey Hongzhuang stared at Bewitching's back. When the thick darkness appeared, she only felt that Bewitching was shrouded in darkness. Master Bewitching's dark attribute is so dense. The wind attribute cultivator from before only filled the crystal ball with wind attribute energy, but Bewitching has already filled the entire crystal ball. Xiaohe looked surprised. Even if they didn't know much about the crystal ball, they could still see some clues. That's right. Look at Sect Master and Steward Wu's expressions. It's obvious that something isn't right. Is there something else other than what we're worried about? Xiaobai couldn't help but worry. Bewitching has obtained the dark inheritance, so his attribute energy must be very strong. However, it's probably stronger than what everyone expected. That's why such a situation has occurred. Bailey Hongzhuang analyzed. After a moment of silence, Wu Wenfeng finally calmed down and slowly said, Bewitching dark attribute max level. When the two words max level were heard, all the cultivators around the tournament stage sucked in a breath of cold air. Shocked and astonished gazes landed on Bewitching, not to mention the fact that the dark attribute was enough to attract everyone's attention. The fact that he had reached max level left everyone dumbfounded. Chapter 43-24. Cough cough. When Yi Haomiao heard this, he almost choked on his own saliva. Did I hear wrongly? It's actually the maximum level? Wang Yanhan also looked at Bewitching in disbelief. He also thought that the highest level should be level 9, because the maximum level was in existence that everyone thought was impossible. Bewitching is indeed an extraordinary person. I knew it from the first time I met him, but I didn't expect him to be so powerful. Wang Yanhan sighed inwardly. Such an achievement simply stunned everyone. It's a pity that it's the dark attribute. If it wasn't, then his future achievements would be unimaginable. Just as Bewitching was about to withdraw his hands, something strange happened. To everyone's astonishment, a scorching white light suddenly appeared in the dark energy. Although this white light seemed very small compared to the darkness, it was extremely bright and could not be ignored. What's going on? Wu Wenfeng was once again dumbfounded. This situation was even more incomprehensible than when he saw Bewitching's maximum level dark attribute. Bewitching had already confirmed that it was the dark attribute. What was the meaning of this white light that suddenly appeared? At this moment, the sect master couldn't help but walk in front of Bewitching. After carefully sensing the power in his body, he couldn't help but frown. Sect master, what is this white light? Wu Wenfeng lowered his voice and asked. This can't be the light attribute, right? Impossible. The sect master immediately denied Wu Wenfeng's guess. As everyone knows, the dark and light attribute are two completely opposite forces. It's impossible for them to merge. How could he awaken these two extreme powers? Hearing this, Wu Wenfeng hurriedly nodded because the situation was too strange, to the extent that he had even lost the most basic judgment. Indeed, this can't be the light attribute. Then sect master, what do you think this white light is? Maybe it's impurities. The sect master slowly said. According to the records, when a person reaches the maximum level, it's very likely that some other inexplicable changes will occur. Perhaps this is one of those changes. Max level is simply too heaven-defying, so it's not surprising that there are some impurities. The other stewards couldn't help but nod their heads after hearing the sect master's judgment. Sect master is right. It should be like this. While the sect master and the stewards were discussing, Bewitching was also staring at the crystal ball in front of him. He had a very magical feeling in his heart. He was certain that this black power was the power of darkness, and it was also the power that he had mastered after receiving the inheritance. However, before the awakening, these powers did not exist in such a manner. After the awakening, there was a change in the way they existed. However, he was also certain that this strand of white light was not the so-called impurities, but the energy of light. After awakening his attribute, he now had a better understanding of the attribute power that he did not understand before. He was also completely sure that this was the power of light. Isn't it said that every practitioner can only awaken one type of power? Bewitching thought to himself. How did I suddenly awaken two types of power? This doesn't make any sense. Why is this so? Chapter 43-25. Bewitching had become the center of everyone's attention. Most importantly, even the gate master and the others could not figure out what was going on with Bewitching. Wu Wenfeng also could not figure out what was going on, so he could only conclude based on what the gate master said. Although Bewitching's awakened talent was the dark attribute, and it was very difficult for this attribute to develop in the upper realm, the fact that he had reached the maximum level was enough to prove that Bewitching was not simple. Maybe he would develop well in the future. Thinking of this, Wu Wenfeng remembered Bewitching's name. After Bewitching walked down the high platform, he returned to Bailey Hongzhuang's side. Bewitching, how are you? Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Bewitching with concern. Just from the reaction of the crowd just now, it was clear that the dark attribute was still discriminated against. Hearing this, Bewitching smiled faintly and shook his head. I'm fine, what can happen to me? Don't worry. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Although this attribute is not liked by everyone, your maximum level has shocked everyone. Not to mention the other cultivators. Even she could not help but be surprised when she found out about this. She did not expect Bewitching's talent in the dark attribute to be so strong. In fact, after knowing this, she was not very worried. Other dark attribute cultivators could not develop well because they did not have the inheritance of the dark energy and did not know how to cultivate in the future. However, Bewitching was different. Long ago, Bewitching had already obtained the inheritance of the dark attribute. With this inheritance, coupled with Bewitching's cultivation talent, his future achievements were imaginable. Bailey Hongzhuang. Steward Wu's voice rang out once again, pulling everyone back from their shock. Wife, you can go up first. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly, then walked up the high platform under everyone's gaze. At this moment, everyone's curious gaze fell on Bailey Hongzhuang. Previously, Bewitching's results had already amazed everyone, but they did not know what kind of attribute Bailey Hongzhuang would awaken as Bewitching's wife. Do you think Bailey Hongzhuang will awaken the dark attribute like Bewitching? If that's the case, then it will be interesting. It shouldn't, right? The probability of Bewitching awakening such an attribute is very small. Even if they are husband and wife, their attributes should not be the same. Sigh. I didn't expect him to awaken to the dark attribute. In the future, his potential. Everyone shook their heads and sighed. They were originally envious of Bailey Hongzhuang, but now their moods had calmed down a bit. After all, in the upper realm, strength was the most important thing. Even if Bewitching's cultivation was very high, the dark attribute had already limited his future development. Everyone was sure that it would not be long before Bewitching was gradually overtaken by other cultivators, and he would still be at the bottom of the list. The only good thing was that he had a max-level talent, so perhaps he would not be overtaken by others too quickly. Chapter 43-26. What's your situation now? Wu Wenfeng looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in front of him and asked in a low voice. Looking at the faint dissatisfaction between Wu Wenfeng's eyebrows, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but smile and said, Steward Wu, I was afraid that it would be troublesome, so I disguised myself. Now that Bewitching is here, I naturally don't need to continue the disguise. I didn't do it on purpose before. I hope you don't blame me. Originally, Wu Wenfeng was a little dissatisfied with the fact that he had been concealed from him. But after listening to the explanation and looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's beautiful face, his heart suddenly understood a little. With Bailey Hongzhuang's demonic appearance, she would indeed attract a lot of trouble. Even with Bewitching by her side now, there were still many practitioners who had designs on her. If it was in the past, it would be even more so. Seeing that you have a reason, I'll let this matter go. Wu Wenfeng sighed. Thank you, Steward Wu. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled playfully. I know that Steward Wu is the most magnanimous person. Let's test it first. Wu Wenfeng looked at Bailey Hongzhuang helplessly. If it was on a normal day, he would definitely be very dissatisfied with practitioners causing trouble time and time again. The strange thing was that when these things happened to Bailey Hongzhuang, he did not have such a feeling. On the contrary, he felt that Bailey Hongzhuang was very lively and cute, so he was more tolerant of her. Yes, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded and immediately placed both hands on the crystal ball. As the elemental energy in her body gradually surged, Bailey Hongzhuang's mind was also filled with hope that she could awaken the dark attribute. Everyone despised the dark attribute, but she did not care at all. On the contrary, because Bewitching had the dark attribute, she was very fond of it. After Bailey Hongzhuang's talent was awakened, the practitioners present could not help but exclaim in surprise. Bailey Hongzhuang opened her eyes and saw a dazzling light filling the entire crystal ball. This ray of light was incomparably sacred, pure and bright. The originally transparent crystal ball suddenly became incomparably resplendent, illuminating everything around it. The cultivators who were closer to the light felt a wave of comfort wash over them. It was as if they had returned to their mother's embrace. It was safe and warm, and all their pores seemed to relax. Light attribute. Bailey Hongzhuang awakened the light attribute. What a rich power of light. It's so dazzling. This is the first time I've seen something like this. Bailey Hongzhuang, who was wearing a white gauze dress, looked like a goddess of light under the light. Her entire body exuded a soft luster, which made her delicate and perfect face look even more beautiful. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang, everyone couldn't help but feel a sense of worship. It was as if she was born to be sacred, honorable, and inviolable. Wu Wenfeng looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in astonishment, then his eyes shone brightly. Bailey Hongzhuang had really given him a huge surprise. Originally, after knowing that Bailey Hongzhuang was an inscription master, he felt very helpless about her insistence on becoming a practitioner. He only felt that Bailey Hongzhuang was not smart enough and did not know how to best develop herself. Chapter 43-27. The sect master, who had originally been very calm, could not help but stand up when he saw the light energy in the crystal ball. He walked slowly to the crystal ball and felt the extremely rich light energy. The light energy was equivalent to a gift from God in everyone's eyes. As long as one got close to it, they would feel as if their entire body and mind had received the essence. That kind of comfortable and peaceful energy was something that nothing else could give them. Even the sect master, who was very powerful, could not help but smile when he got close to this energy. The sect master's eyes flickered with excitement. When he looked at Bailey Hongzhuang, his eyes were also dazzling. Is she the inscription master that you recruited? The sect master could not help but look at Wu Wenfeng and ask. Wu Wenfeng smiled and nodded. That's right, sect master. She is Bailey Hongzhuang. You've made a great contribution this time. The sect master patted Wu Wenfeng's shoulder happily. You'll be rewarded. Thank you, sect master. Wu Wenfeng was delighted. He knew all too well how important a light attribute cultivator was to a sect. Previously, the Fiery Flames sect only had one light attribute cultivator. This cultivator's status in the sect was no less than their stewards. Bailey Hongzhuang seemed to be even more talented in the light attribute. One could imagine her future status in the Fiery Flames sect. At that thought, Wu Wenfeng could not help but rejoice. He was glad that he had chosen to support Bailey Hongzhuang. If he had known that Bailey Hongzhuang had awakened a light attribute, he would not have hesitated to reject anyone who came looking for trouble, let alone the D family. When Bewitching noticed that Bailey Hongzhuang had awakened a light attribute, a trace of astonishment flashed across his handsome eyes. Then a joyful smile appeared on his face. His wife was supposed to be a proud daughter of heaven. As he looked at Bailey Hongzhuang, who was illuminated by the light energy, he felt that it was simply too suitable. Previously, He had not been able to figure out which attribute suited Bailey Hongzhuang. Now that the light energy had appeared, he felt that there was no energy more suitable for her than the light attribute. This is too shocking. Miss Bailey actually awakened the light attribute. Yi Haomiao looked at Wang Yanhan in shock. Although he had previously joked that he hoped that Bailey Hongzhuang would be able to awaken the light attribute, he didn't expect that his blind guess would actually come true. Little junior sister's talent is amazing. Not only did Wang Yanhan notice that Bailey Hongzhuang had awakened the light attribute, he also discovered that the level of this light attribute was extremely terrifying. Do you remember when Xiao Rojin awakened the light attribute? At that time, the sect master said that Xiao Rojin's attribute talent level was extremely high. She was already a rare light attribute cultivator. Look at the crystal ball in front of little junior sister. The light is even brighter than Xiao Rojin's back then. Hearing this, Yi Haomiao couldn't help but take a closer look, and said, "Before you mentioned it, I didn't think much of it, but now that you mention it, I realize that it really is. Could it be that Miss Bailey's attribute level was even higher than Xiao Rojin's? That would be amazing." "I think so." Wang Yanhan nodded. "Look, the sect master's attitude has also changed. I think he will announce it later." Just as everyone was discussing, a similar white figure slowly appeared in everyone's line of sight. Chapter 43-28. Look, Xiao Rojin is here too. Could it be that she knew that Bailey Hongzhuang would awaken the light attribute, so she came here to take a look? This Xiao Rojin's status in the Blazing Flame School is also extraordinary. It's fine that she came late today, but she actually came in such a high-profile manner. I really don't know what to say. Now that Bailey Hongzhuang has also awakened the light attribute, she won't be the only light attribute cultivator in the Blazing Flame School in the future. I wonder if she can still be like this. Xiao Rojin just happened to be interested, so she wanted to come to the awakening ceremony to take a look. However, she didn't expect to notice the shining light attribute on the high platform as soon as she arrived. Her expression immediately changed. Such a dense light was even more powerful than what she had been before, causing her expression to stiffen. Light attribute cultivators were rare in the upper realm. She didn't expect the Blazing Flame School to recruit another one so quickly. It was really surprising. Bailey Hongzhuang also didn't expect her awakened attribute to be light. She couldn't help but be shocked. She inexplicably remembered the two words that the Master of the Ruins said to her back in the ruins. Ill-fated relationship. Ill-fated relationship. All this time, the chains of this chain had been circling in her mind. She couldn't understand why the Master of the Ruins would say such a thing. She and Bewitching had always been developing smoothly without any obstacles. How could it be related to ill-fated relationship? However, when she awakened the light attribute, she felt that the ill-fated relationship might have something to do with their different attributes. Light and darkness were two completely different attributes. Although it was a little strange for it to appear in a couple, it shouldn't have too much of an impact. She had never heard of cultivators of different attributes not being able to be together. Even if they were of completely opposite attributes, there shouldn't be any relationship between them. "Master, what's Bailey Hongzhuang's talent level?" Wu Wenfeng looked at the dense light in front of him. After thinking for a while, he decided to ask the master. In fact, he felt that such a dense light was very similar to the situation that appeared with Bewitching previously, but he didn't dare to say it out loud. After all, it was impossible to reach the max level on a normal day. It was already inconceivable that a single max level player had appeared today. If there were two max level players, and both of them were a married couple, it was simply too unbelievable. However, the sect leader still said those two words. Max level. Bailey Hongzhuang, light attribute max level. At this moment, without waiting for Wu Wenfeng to announce it, the sect leader had already announced it himself. Even with the sect master's temperament, he couldn't help but feel a surge of emotions. What did it mean to have a max-level light attribute cultivator? If he could not spread this news, he did not know how many forces would envy him. He didn't expect his luck to be so good. Wu Wenfeng actually recruited such a talented cultivator for him. It was simply an incomparable surprise. Following the sect leader's words, all the cultivators present were dumbfounded. For a moment, everyone couldn't help but imagine what it meant to have a full-level light attribute cultivator. It meant that Bailey Hongzhuang's future was limitless, and it meant that she would have a high status. Chapter 43-29. After Xiao Rojin heard the sect master's announcement, she could not help but tremble, and her expression became extremely ugly. Back then, when she was assessed as an 8th-level light attribute cultivator, it had already shocked everyone. However, now there was actually a max-level light attribute cultivator. This was simply too unbelievable. This kind of talent was simply a legendary existence. However, the next scene made Xiao Rojin's eyes light up. This was because after the crystal ball released the extreme light attribute light, a faint black light suddenly appeared in it. After noticing this black light, everyone's expression became strange again. How strange! Previously, a white light appeared in Bewitching's darkness attribute, and a black light appeared in Bailey Hongzhuang's light attribute. Could it be that because the two of them are husband and wife, their attributes are somewhat mixed? That's impossible, right? I've never heard of such a situation. Wu Wenfeng could not help but look at the sect master again. Bewitching and Bailey Hongzhuang had the same situation, and after connecting the two, it became very strange. Sect master, what's going on? The sect master frowned and shook his head. A max-level cultivator has only been recorded in books before, and has never been seen in real life. Therefore, I can't judge the real situation. The only thing I can be sure of is that their attribute talents are all at the max level. As for the rest, I'll do some research. At this moment, even the sect master could not easily make a judgment. Hearing the sect master's words, Wu Wenfeng also nodded. This kind of situation could only be confirmed after consulting the books. After all, this kind of situation was simply too rare. Bailey Hongzhuang stared at the darkness attribute energy in front of her, and she felt that all of this was not a coincidence. Bewitching's situation just now must have some kind of connection with her situation. Furthermore, this trace of black energy was not an impurity at all, but darkness energy. Previously, when she had not awakened, she could not judge, but now that her attribute talent had awakened, she could already judge that this was definitely darkness energy. As Bailey Hongzhuang walked down the stage, everyone's eyes never left her. Especially when they saw Bailey Hongzhuang and Bewitching standing together, their expressions became extremely strange. Today, everyone's limelight had been overshadowed by Bailey Hongzhuang and Xiao Luo, unless another max-level cultivator appeared. However, everyone knew that this was impossible. Bewitching. As Bailey Hongzhuang walked to Bewitching's side, the two looked at each other and immediately understood everything. Wife, is the power you've awakened darkness? Bewitching asked. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. That's right. Your darkness attribute is mixed with the light attribute, right? Yes. Bewitching and Bailey Hongzhuang both fell into deep thought. This situation was indeed a little strange. Why is this happening? Bailey Hongzhuang frowned slightly. This situation was completely out of their expectations. Could it be that a person can actually awaken more than one type of power? That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.